Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where the moon hangs low over a frozen plain, its silver light skating across an endless expanse of snow that muffles every footstep you take. The air is so sharp it feels like it could chip your breath into ice. A wind slithers across your cheeks, and even with your hood pulled tight, you can feel the sting, as if the night itself is testing whether you belong here. You probably won't survive this, not without the old knowledge, the kind that kept people alive when winter wasn't a season but a force with teeth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere cold or somewhere warm, let me know your location and the local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first frost doesn't come with fanfare. It creeps in while you're still convincing yourself you have more time. You might wake to find your eyelashes stiff with tiny white crystals, each one a little reminder that the margin for error is now razor thin. For Native American tribes in the northern reaches, the onset of deep winter meant a shift in every waking thought. Survival became less about what you could do, and more about what you remembered to do before the cold claimed its due. You trudge toward camp, as the sun drops behind jagged black pines, their needles groaning with ice. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, proof that someone in the village is ahead of the game. That smoke, drifting low and lazy, is more than a comfort. It's a lifeline. It tells you there's shelter, heat, and maybe a hot meal waiting. It also warns anyone out hunting that night is closing in. Here's your first reality. Not every tribe relied on the same strategies. The Lakota might adapt differently than the Ojibwe, and the Inuit differently still. But all understood one core truth: winter respected no one, and preparation wasn't optional. The mainstream fact here? Many tribes began stockpiling as early as late summer, curing meat, weaving thicker garments, and repairing shelters for the long freeze ahead. But there's a quirk to human nature. It sometimes dances with risk just to feel alive. Some younger hunters like to wait until the very last moment to bring in the heavier hides from the drying racks. They claimed the cold helped set the fur, making it warmer when worn. Historians still argue whether that was real knowledge passed down through experience, or just a way to prove they weren't afraid of frostbite nipping at their fingertips. You pull your cloak tighter. The pelt smells faintly of smoke and cedar, the result of a preservation process that also keeps moths and insects away. Underneath, you're wearing layers: deerskin close to the body, a thicker hide over that, and maybe even a woven plant fiber sash for extra insulation. The trick isn't just to trap heat, but to manage moisture. Sweat is the enemy. It freezes quickly, turning warmth into a death sentence. You pass a ridge, where the wind cuts sideways, flinging handfuls of powdered snow that sting your eyes. Every step here has to be placed with care. A misstep into hidden ice could mean a twisted ankle and a slow, cold end before help could reach you. The elders teach you to read the snow like a language. The powder over there? Too light, wind-blown, and covering uneven ground. The smooth crust to your left? Safer, though it might squeak loudly underfoot, alerting any animals nearby. The sky darkens, not into pure black, but into that deep indigo that makes the stars pop like holes in the night. You feel the temperature drop with each fading shade. Somewhere behind you, the river's surface groans as the ice thickens. That sound isn't ominous, it's reassuring. Thicker ice means you might be able to cross safely tomorrow. Or it could mean the fish are slowing down, harder to catch until you find the right spot to drill. In the village, fire pits are already glowing. Families sit close, children tucked under blankets made from rabbit fur and woven reeds. The fire's heat isn't just physical, it's psychological. The sight of flames means you're part of something bigger than yourself, a group pulling together against the cold's quiet siege. Before you sit, you look toward the horizon one more time. That line between sky and snow is where danger often shows itself first. Maybe it's a predator, maybe it's a storm, or maybe it's nothing but the wind moving over open land. Still, you check. Everyone checks. That's survival. As the first night of true cold deepens, you feel the shift. This isn't a trial you pass alone. This is a dance between preparation, instinct, and community. And you've only taken your first step into it. You wake before the first light, your breath drifting in slow, ghostly puffs above your face. The ground beneath your bedding feels hard as stone, though you know it's only frozen earth and snow compacted under layers of hide and woven mats. Outside, the wind hisses against the lodge walls, each gust rattling the animal skin door flap, like a reminder that the cold is patient, waiting for you to make a mistake. You roll to your side, stretch carefully because even the smallest crack in your clothing will let that icy air slide in, and then you push yourself up to face the day. The plan is simple but vital. Build a shelter that will hold heat long enough to keep you alive when the temperature sinks past comfort and into danger. For many tribes in the northern plains and subarctic regions, this meant working with snow, not against it. The mainstream fact is this snow, for all its frostbite charm, is an excellent insulator. If you pack it right, it can hold warmth in and keep deadly winds out. Inuit families perfected the igloo, not just as an emergency stopover, but as a full winter home when conditions demanded it. Further south, Ojibwe and Cree hunters might dig into snowdrifts to make quick shelters while traveling, covering the hollow with hides to trap body heat. You trudge to the edge of camp, where a clean bank of snow stands waiting. Your breath is already clouding your vision, and your fingers itch for warmth. But the work must be done now before the sky turns the pale pink that warns of harsher weather. You scoop snow with a flat bone shovel, your movement steady, because rushing only collapses the walls you're trying to raise. Here's the quirky part. Some people swore by mixing crushed ice into the snow before packing it into blocks, claiming it made the shelter sing when the wind hit, a kind of humming sound they took as a good omen. Historians still argue whether this was an actual acoustic trick or just a way to distract themselves from how numb their toes were getting. Once you've built the shell, you crawl inside. The air instantly changes less sharp, almost still. Your body heat starts to pool around you like a secret you're keeping from the winter. The floor is lined with spruce boughs to keep the cold from seeping upward, and in the center, a small, carefully managed oil lamp burns with the faint smell of seal fat. No bonfires here, just enough flame to take the edge off the frost without melting the roof over your head. You pause to listen. The outside world is muffled, almost gone. That's one of the quiet gifts of a snow shelter, the silence. It's a kind of silence that presses in, making you hyper-aware of your own heartbeat, the crackle of your joints as you move, the tiny pop of resin in the spruce needles under you. In larger, semi-permanent winter camps, shelters might not be snow alone. Thick log walls chinked with moss, bark shingles layered like scales, entrances angled away from prevailing winds, every design choice fought against heat loss. And if you were lucky enough to be near a frozen lake, you could even build partly below ice level, using the solid water as an additional windbreak. By midday, the sky's blue is brittle, a clear sign the temperature will fall again tonight. You take a slow walk around the village, checking for weak points in other shelters. It's not just courtesy, it's insurance. One family's collapsed wall means more mouths to feed and fewer warm hands to help if the storm turns. You remember the stories the elders told about winters so cruel that even the trees seemed to crack in protest. They'd speak of the sound sharp, sudden, like a rifle shot when the sap froze and split the wood. Those same elders would then glance at the sky, reading invisible patterns you couldn't see. The snow tells you if it's friend or foe, they'd say, and you believed them. By the time the sun begins its lazy fall toward the horizon, the shelters stand ready. You know that tonight, when the wind returns, you'll be inside, hearing it batter the walls and fail to reach you. And in that small, hard-earned bubble of warmth, you'll realize survival isn't just about endurance, it's about shaping the cold into something that works for you. The cold has a way of making you notice the weight of everything you carry, especially the weight of the clothing on your back. As you step outside into the pale, brittle light of morning, the air feels so sharp you almost expect it to cut you. Today's task is about armor, though not the gleaming kind with metal plates and polished helmets. This is about fur and hide, about wrapping yourself in the skins of creatures that have already mastered the art of survival. You pull your cloak tight around your shoulders, the thick buffalo hide bending stiffly where last night's frost still lingers in the outer hairs. Underneath, you've got a layer of soft deerskin, and beneath that, strips of rabbit fur sewn into a quilt-like lining. The mainstream fact here is straightforward. Many Native American tribes, especially those in the far north and high plains, relied on layered animal hides and furs to keep warm. Each layer trapped heat, creating pockets of insulation that slowed the cold's crawl toward your skin. It's not just about piling on thickness. The fur's direction matters. The outermost layer, often worn with the hair facing out to repel snow and wind, and the inner layer worn with the hair facing in to cradle warmth close to the body. You notice how the inner fur feels almost alive against your skin, as though the animal's survival instinct is still whispering to yours. Here's the quirky tidbit you've heard from the elders. Some hunters swore that wearing the pelt of a predator like a wolf or lynx lent you its spirit's toughness during the worst storms. They claimed the wind feared such furs. Historians still argue whether this belief began as a spiritual truth or a psychological edge in a landscape where confidence could mean the difference between life and death. Your boots are mucklucks, soft-soled and lined with fur, designed to flex as you walk so your feet stay nimble instead of clumsy and numb. The snowshoe frames you sling over your shoulder are bound with strips of rawhide, stiff now but softening with your body heat. Every stitch and seam in your clothing is a line of defense, and every line has a story stitched by someone who knew that beauty and function could share the same thread. The wind picks up as you walk toward the river. Your breath spills out in thick plumes, instantly frosting the tips of your eyelashes. The outer fur does its job, beads of snow rolling off without soaking through. You're grateful, because once fur gets wet in sub-zero air, it becomes a treacherous trap, freezing solid and stealing heat from the inside out. That's why drying racks always stand near the fire pit, a kind of overnight hospital for the garments that keep you alive. In camp, you see children bundled so thoroughly they waddle instead of walk, their arms sticking out stiff like little snow geese. A grandmother adjusts the hood on a toddler's fur parka, tucking in a fringe of beads that jingles softly. Decorations aren't frivolous here, they're identity. They tell others where you come from, who your people are, and sometimes even what role you play in the tribe. In the deep of winter, a flash of dyed porcupine quills or a strip of patterned beadwork might be the only splash of color against the white and grey world. You remember a story about a particularly bitter winter when the wind howled for 9 nights straight. Hunters returning from long treks would shake the frost from their furs in great shimmering clouds, filling the air with glittering ice dust. One man's pelt, stiff with rime, made a sound like paper tearing as he flexed it by the fire. The children thought it was magic the cold caught and released in an audible snap. By mid-afternoon the sun hangs low, its light like thin honey drizzled over the snow. You feel the cold trying to find a way in, but your layers hold steady. The fur smells faintly of smoke and pine resin from weeks of drying near the fire, a scent that has come to mean safety. And as the day dips toward evening, you realize this truth. Your armor isn't just a shield against the cold. It's a living link between you and the animals whose strength now walks with you. You rub your hands together, not because you think it will make them warm, it won't, but because you're about to do something that requires every bit of dexterity you can coax from numb fingers. The cold is an impatient teacher. Without fire, the night will claim you in hours, maybe less if the wind gets bold. And in this place, you can't just strike a match and call it done. The day is crisp, with a sky so pale it almost looks bleached. You kneel in a shallow depression you've cleared of snow, your knees sinking into the frozen ground through layers of hide. The mainstream fact is this: many Native American tribes could build a fire from materials at hand even in the harshest conditions, long before any European traders brought flintlocks or iron strikers. They relied on friction, fire starting, stone tools, and an intimate knowledge of dry tinder sources hidden under the snow. Your first move is to find tinder that will catch a spark. It's not the obvious dry grass, you need something finer, more patient. You split open a chunk of rotten wood and scrape away the soft, papery shavings. They're as dry as any summer day, having been sealed inside the log for months. You mix them with slivers of birch bark, the kind that curls into itself like it's trying to hide from the wind. The bark's oils will help it catch, even if the air feels like it should snuff out every ember. You place a bow drill at your side. The spindle, made from hard wood, fits into the palm socket you've carved from bone. The bow's cord is twisted sinew, strong and slightly sticky in the cold. You loop it once around the spindle and press down, your body leaning forward like you're about to wrestle the earth itself. Then you begin the motion steady, back and forth, the bow sawing, the spindle spinning, the tip biting into the fireboard below. The quirky tidbit here? Some elders would hum or chant in rhythm with the bow drill, claiming it helped invite the fire. Whether that was spiritual encouragement or just a clever way to keep the tempo steady, historians still argue. You hum now, low and quiet, more to keep your breathing calm than anything else. Smoke begins to thread upward from the notch in the fireboard, pale at first, then darkening. You keep the pressure steady until you see the tiniest red coal glowing at the center of the dust. Carefully, you tip it into your bundle of tinder, cupping your hands around it as though you're holding the last heartbeat of summer. You blow gently, the ember flaring with each breath until it becomes a flicker, then a curl of flame. The satisfaction is immediate and deep. You feed the flame with twigs, then finger-thick sticks, letting it grow without rushing. Soon, the fire is tall enough to crackle, the sound like tiny applause in the snow. The heat is almost shocking after the sting of cold air. It's as if your skin doesn't trust it yet. In the village, fires are rarely left unattended. Someone will always be close, adding wood, shifting embers, keeping the flames alive through the long night. A communal fire might burn for weeks without ever fully going out, its coals nursed and carried from one pit to another in clay pots lined with ash to preserve the heat. As night falls, you sit by the fire, feeling your muscles loosen. The flames dance, reflecting in the ice crusts on nearby trees, turning them into brief torches before the dark swallows them again. You think about how fragile this light is, how one careless step or a gust of wind could scatter it, and yet, in the right hands, it can outlast even the coldest night. The fire's glow still clings to your clothes when you step into the deeper dark beyond its reach. Out here, the cold doesn't just bite, it presses in, settling on your shoulders like an invisible weight. The snow crunches under your feet with a sound so sharp it almost echoes. Tonight, you're not hunting, not gathering wood, not even checking the traps. Tonight, you're part of the night watch. In the village, survival is never a solo act. The mainstream fact is that in many Native American winter camps, people took turns staying awake through the long, frigid hours to guard against both predators and the dangerous drop in temperature that could snatch away those who slept too deeply. A lone figure moving among the shelters, stirring the coals, checking the fire pits, it's more than a routine. It's a promise that no one will be left to face the cold alone. Your breath rises in thick, ghostly shapes, catching the faint light from the moon. Somewhere in the near distance, you hear the muffled creak of a tree splitting under the cold's pressure. You glance toward it, but the sound is already swallowed by the night. A coyote's bark cuts through next, sharp, quick, and then gone. That's the thing about night sounds out here. They tell you something's there, but not exactly where, and not whether it's moving closer. You walk past one of the lodges where two families are sleeping. The flap lifts slightly as a draft sneaks in, and you see the faint orange glow of a fire inside. A small girl stirs under her blanket, her face peeking out for only a second before she burrows back in. You tuck the flap back into place, making sure the wind can't pry it open again. Here's the quirky detail you once heard from an elder. During bitter storms, some night watchers tied small bells or carved wooden clappers to the edges of camp. If a predator tried to slip in quietly, the movement would set off a chime or rattle. Historians still argue whether this was more effective for warning the humans or simply keeping the predators curious enough to hang back instead of charging in. You pause at the far edge of the camp, where the wind blows unhindered. Your hood shifts slightly, letting a sliver of cold brush against your cheek. The moon is brighter here, painting the snow in silver and shadow. It makes everything look closer than it really is, which is both comforting and dangerous. Every so often, you circle back to the main fire pit. You crouch to stir the embers, adding a log if needed. The heat on your face is almost shocking compared to the icy air on your back. You linger for a moment, but never too long. You have to keep moving. Standing still in the night watch is an invitation for the cold to settle into your bones. You pass another watcher heading in the opposite direction. You nod, exchange a quiet greeting, and keep going. There's no need for long conversation. The rhythm of the watch is its own kind of language, steady, dependable, always moving forward. By the time the horizon begins to pale, your legs ache from walking and your eyelids are heavy, but you also feel something else. A deep, quiet satisfaction. The village is intact. The fires are still burning, and no one has been lost to the cold. You return to your shelter knowing you've done your part in the silent, unseen work that keeps everyone alive through the harshest nights. The air smells faintly of last night's fire when you step into the heart of camp. Smoke drifts lazily upward from a half-dozen fire pits, curling against the pale morning sky. Your stomach reminds you loudly that the warmth of a night's watch doesn't last long without food. Today's comfort will come from cooking in the coals, a method older than memory, and as much about survival as it is about taste. The mainstream fact is simple but essential. Many Native American tribes perfected the art of cooking directly in embers or burying food in heated stones to retain moisture and flavor while shielding it from the bitter air. In the dead of winter, this wasn't just about making a meal, it was about conserving energy. Less time exposed to the wind meant fewer chances for frostbite or exhaustion. You begin with meat from the last hunt, thick cuts of venison rubbed with crushed juniper berries, and a pinch of salt traded from another band weeks ago. The scent of the berries is sharp and green, a small echo of warmer seasons. You wrap the meat in broad green leaves kept frozen outside since autumn, their surface now softened by steam from a pot set nearby. Next comes the coal bed. You rake aside the flames until you find the deep, glowing heart of the fire. The heat here is steady and even, perfect for slow cooking. You set the wrapped meat directly onto the coals, then cover it with another layer of ash and embers. No rush, this will take time, but the reward will be a tenderness you can't get any other way. The quirky tidbit? Some cooks claimed that singing to the food while it rested in the coals made it remember the warmth and taste richer. Historians still argue whether this was simply a way to pass the time or a spiritual belief about binding the fire's energy into the meal. You hum a little yourself, not ready to dismiss the idea. While the meat cooks, you prepare root vegetables dug from caches buried deep before the frost. Tubers like camas and prairie turnip are scrubbed clean, split, and tucked into a basket lined with hot stones. The basket is wrapped in a hide, trapping the heat so the vegetables steam gently without drying out. The aroma that escapes is earthy and sweet, blending with the sharper scent of roasting meat. You sit close to the fire, rubbing your hands together as the wind flirts with the edge of your blanket. The cooking time gives space for talk low, easy conversation about hunting luck, the thickness of the ice on the lake, and whether the snow will harden enough for faster travel. A child toddles past, clutching a scrap of roasted rabbit from an earlier batch, his cheeks pink from the heat and cold. When the time feels right, you uncover the meat. The leaves have blackened at the edges, their inner layers soft and dripping with savory juices. The venison falls apart under gentle pressure, steam curling upward into the morning air. You pass pieces around, the first bite warming you from the inside out in a way no fire can match. The vegetables follow, sweet and smoky, their soft flesh a reminder that patience can turn the simplest ingredients into something close to luxury. The meal ends without ceremony. The coals are banked for later use, the ashes swept aside, and the bones set near the edge of camp for scavengers. In this cycle, nothing is wasted, not the heat, not the food, not the time spent together around the fire. As you stand, pulling your cloak tighter, you realize that cooking here isn't just about feeding the body. It's a quiet act of defiance against the cold, a statement that warmth and flavor can exist even in the harshest winter. The snow under your boots squeaks in that unmistakable way it does only when the air is far below freezing. The sun has long since ducked behind the trees, leaving a deep blue wash over the land. Tonight isn't for sleeping through, you're on the night watch again. But this time, with the extra weight of knowing predators aren't the only threat. The cold itself will test you. Slipping in anywhere you've let your guard drop. You make your way toward the edge of camp, passing fires that have burned low to glowing embers. Shadows move within the lodges, flickering with the rhythm of the flames. In the silence, you hear the faint crack of a branch snapping far off in the dark. It's not loud, but it's enough to set your senses on edge. The mainstream fact here is this. Many Native American camps maintained a rotation of night watchers during the coldest months, not only to spot predators but to check on the fires, the shelters, and even the sleepers themselves. A fire gone out or a draft in a sleeping space could be just as dangerous as a wolf in the night. The watchers kept the community breathing through those deep hours. You pass the lodge of an elder whose health has been failing since the cold set in. You crouch and slip inside briefly, moving quietly so as not to wake her. The fire is low but alive, casting a warm amber glow over her sleeping form. You add a piece of dry wood, watching the flames stretch up again, and tuck the hide door more tightly before stepping back into the dark. A movement catches your eye near the tree line, a long shadow gliding low, silent as falling snow. A wolf, maybe two, their fur blending perfectly with the frozen landscape. You don't rush. Instead, you stand still, watching their slow, deliberate pace. They're not hunting you tonight. Not yet. You grip the handle of your spear anyway. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some watchers carried small pouches of dried sage or cedar, scattering a pinch on the fire when predators came too close. The rising scent was believed to carry a warning to the animals or to call on spirits for protection. Historians still argue whether it worked on the wolves, but everyone agrees it calmed the humans. You decide to do a round through the far side of camp, the part most exposed to the wind. The shelters here are built low and tight, snow banked up against their sides for extra insulation. You check each one, listening for the sound of steady breathing inside. Every lodge is a heartbeat in the larger body of the community. Hours pass in a rhythm you barely notice. Walk, check, warm your hands by a fire, walk again. The sky is so clear that the stars seem to shift in slow arcs above you, marking the night's quiet passage. You wonder if the people sleeping now will remember this watch in the morning. Probably not. And that's the point. The best nights are the ones where nothing happens, where danger stays in the shadows, where the cold doesn't win. Just before dawn, you spot the wolves again, now farther off, heading toward the ridge. You watch until they vanish behind the snow-heavy pines. Then you turn back toward the village, where the first pale streaks of light touch the horizon. Your feet ache, your fingers are stiff, but the fires are still burning, the people are still warm, and the night has passed without loss. That's enough. The sun hovers low in the southern sky, casting a pale gold over the snow that glitters like crushed glass. The air is so still you can hear the faint tick of ice forming along the riverbank. Today's task isn't about sitting by the fire or guarding the camp. It's about moving across this frozen world without sinking into it. You're going to strap on snowshoes, those woven frames that turn deep snow from a trap into a pathway. Among the northern tribes, especially the Cree and Algonquin, snowshoes weren't optional. They were as vital as the spear or bow. They allowed hunters to cross wide, soft drifts where each step without them would mean plunging waist-deep and wasting precious energy. The frames were often bent from green wood and laced with rawhide, creating a taut net that spread your weight evenly. The skill wasn't just in making them, but in walking with them. A newcomer stomped awkwardly and tripped. A practiced traveler moved like a shadow. Your pair rests against a spruce trunk, the bindings stiff from last night's frost. You loosen them carefully and slide your boots into place, tightening the straps until they bite slightly. At first, the wide frames feel clumsy, but after a few steps, you find the rhythm lift. Set, glide. The snow accepts your weight without swallowing your legs whole. There's an old camp tale you once heard about a hunter who raced a deer across open snow after a storm. The animal, heavy-legged in the deep powder, floundered while the hunter skimmed across the surface on his snowshoes, closing the gap until the chase ended with a clean throw of the spear. Whether the story grew taller with each telling or not, it still gets passed around as proof of the snowshoe's quiet power. Your route takes you away from the clustered lodges, out toward a stand of birches where the snow lies in soft, untouched mounds. The silence here is almost too perfect, broken only by the soft creak of your bindings and the occasional groan of a branch shifting under its icy load. You scan for signs, rabbit tracks stitching neat patterns between the trees, the shallow trough of a fox trail curving toward a hidden den. One of the elders once told you that in winter, the ground speaks more than the air. It's true. The snow records everything who passed through, when they came, and whether they were in a hurry. You crouch to study a fresh set of hoofprints. A small herd of caribou moved through here not long ago, the edges of their tracks still sharp. If you move quietly, you might catch sight of them before they reach the ridge. The snowshoe's gift is more than speed, it's silence. Without the sudden crunch of breaking crust, your approach is almost ghostly. You weave between the birches, each step placing you closer to the sounds you've been listening for, the soft snort of breath, the faint rustle of bodies shifting under their winter coats. You spot them through a gap in the trees, 5 caribou, their dark eyes glinting in the low light. You don't need to hunt them today. Instead, you watch, letting their steady presence sink into you. In a winter where survival often feels like a struggle against scarcity, seeing life thriving here is its own kind of reassurance. On the way back to camp, you take a different route, skimming over drifts that would have stopped you cold without the webbed frames under your feet. It's easy to see why the people here treat snowshoes as more than tools, they're lifelines, bridging the gap between isolation and connection, between hunger and the hunt. When you finally step back into the village, you slide the frames from your boots and lean them against your shelter, brushing the snow from their laces. They'll be ready for tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until the thaw comes. For now, you step inside, feeling the warmth of the fire rise to meet you, grateful for the strange, graceful dance the snowshoes allow on a land that would rather see you stand still. The coldest days don't just freeze the ground beneath your feet, they turn water itself into something you can walk on. But the frozen lakes and rivers that look solid and harmless can hide danger if you don't treat them with respect. Today, you're heading out to collect water, and that means dealing with ice the right way. In the winter camps of many northern tribes, knowing how to use ice was as important as knowing how to avoid it. If you were careless, you could end up plunging through a weak spot into water, cold enough to steal your breath and strength in seconds. If you were wise, you could turn the frozen landscape into a resource, melting clean snow or chipping solid ice into blocks to store for drinking, cooking, or trade. Your steps are deliberate as you approach the river. The surface stretches smooth and pale, a thin crust of snow dusting the ice below. A hunter once told you that the river can talk to those who listen. The groan and crack of ice expanding in the cold tells you whether it's safe. Today, it hums in long, low notes, deep enough to make your boots vibrate. You kneel and clear away the snow, revealing ice so clear it's almost invisible. Using a stone adze, you chip carefully, sending shards skittering across the surface. The trick is not to hammer like you're breaking rock, but to coax the ice into giving way. A few minutes in, you have a neat, round hole, steam curling faintly upward as the warmer water meets the frigid air. There's a story the old fishermen liked to share about a winter when the ice froze so thick that they had to dig down with 2 men's worth of tools just to reach water. They say the first sip that year tasted sweeter than anything they'd had in summer. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's just the way hardship turns memory into honey. But either way, it makes you more grateful for what you find now. You scoop water with a carved wooden ladle, careful not to drop it into the hole. The liquid feels heavier in the cold, as though it knows it's not far from freezing solid again. You fill a skin bag and knot it tight, then chip a few small blocks of ice to carry back for melting later. On the walk home, you pass a pair of children dragging a sled piled high with snow. They'll melt it for washing. Not drinking clean snow. Still needs to be boiled before it's safe to sip, unless you want a mouthful of invisible trouble. Out here, even water has rules you have to follow. Back in camp, you hang the water skin near the fire, letting the heat take off the edge of the chill. The ice blocks you stacked by the shelter will last for days, slowly softening into liquid when you need them. There's a quiet satisfaction in knowing that you've tamed a little piece of the frozen world, turning something that could kill you into something that keeps you alive. As you settle in for the evening, you hear the river again faint through the still air, groaning and shifting under its icy armor. Tomorrow, it might sound different. But tonight, you've got what you need, and that's enough. The night arrives with a sharp, dry cold, the kind that turns each exhale into a little storm of frost that hangs in the air before falling away. Tonight isn't about hunting or hauling water, it's about strength of spirit. At the heart of camp, a low drumbeat begins to ripple through the stillness, slow and steady like a heartbeat. It's a signal you've been waiting for all day. In winter, some tribes held nighttime gatherings, not just to lift morale, but to bind the community together in a shared rhythm of sound, movement, and breath. The steady pulse of the drum carried beyond the lodges, reminding anyone out in the dark that they were part of something warm and living. These ceremonies weren't just for show, they were medicine for the mind during the longest, harshest nights. You step into the circle forming near the main fire. The flames leap higher than usual, casting a halo of gold over the packed snow. Elders sit closest to the heat, wrapped in furs, their eyes reflecting the flicker. The drummers have positioned themselves at the center, each with a hand drum made from stretched hide, the surface warmed near the flames, so the cold won't dull its tone. The first rhythm is slow, each beat separated by silence that seems to stretch just far enough to make your heart wait for the next. Then voices rise, not loud, but strong, weaving in and out of the drum's pulse. The melody doesn't follow a pattern you'd find on paper. It's shaped by breath and feeling, by the way the sound moves through the group like wind through pine branches. Someone passes you a rattle made from a hollowed gourd filled with tiny pebbles. You shake it gently at first, matching the drum, then let the motion flow without thinking. The sound is like dry snow sliding off a branch, soft but insistent. There's an old account told by travelers who spent a winter with a northern band. During one brutal season, the people drummed and sang every night for 2 weeks straight. The storm outside raged without pause, but inside, the fire never went out and no one lost their will to endure. They said the songs were as important as food or shelter, feeding a hunger that nothing else could touch. Whether that's literal truth or the way memory shapes survival stories, it's hard to argue with the results. The tempo changes, quickening like the rush of wind before a snow squall. A few people stand, stamping their feet in time, sending up small bursts of powder from the packed snow beneath them. You feel the cold fade from your bones, replaced by a heat that comes from somewhere deeper than the fire. After a while, the drumming slows again, the circle quieting as if the night itself is leaning in to listen. One by one, voices drop out until there's only the soft thud of the drum and the occasional pop from the fire. Then, even that fades, leaving a silence so deep you can hear the faint hiss of falling snow. The ceremony ends without a spoken word. People drift back to their shelters, the lingering warmth and rhythm still inside them. You walk slowly, the air on your cheeks cool but no longer biting. Inside your lodge, the quiet feels richer somehow, as though the walls are holding the echo of the drum just for you. Outside, the cold still rules the night, but now it feels less like an enemy and more like a test you know you can pass. Morning comes pale and thin, the sun a faint disk straining through a wash of icy haze. You step outside to find the air brittle with cold, the kind that makes sound travel farther and sharper. From somewhere downriver, a faint grey thread of smoke winds upward into the sky. It's not from your camp too far, too narrow. In winter, even the smallest sign like this can be a message, and today, you're going to read it. For many tribal communities, smoke was more than a byproduct of fire, it was language. When winter separated hunting parties or scattered families across miles of frozen terrain, the thin, distinct shapes of smoke signals could bridge the gap. A careful eye could tell the difference between a cooking fire's steady plume, a watchman's urgent warning, or a ceremonial signal. In the wide, white expanse, that single thread of grey meant there were other human hearts beating out there. You walk toward the ridge to get a better view. Snow crunches under your boots in small explosions of sound. Your breath clouds and drifts, nearly matching the pace of that distant plume. Once you crest the ridge, you can see the whole valley spread out below a frozen river winding through stands of leafless birch, their trunks stark against the snow. The smoke rises from the far side, twisting and curling as it hits the slow wind. Elders have always told you that reading smoke isn't just about the shape, it's about context. A column that's steady and straight often means calm conditions. Deliberate burning, thin and quick, could be a small signal fire meant to vanish fast. You study this one. It's wide at the base, then narrows to a thin rope before fraying at the top. Someone's adding fuel slowly, not in a rush. There's a tale passed down about a hunter who saved an entire winter camp by recognizing the difference between two smokes, one from a friendly band looking to trade, and one from a hostile group trying to lure people out. That quick decision kept the camp alive. Whether every detail of the story is fact or not, the warning is clear. You can't be casual with signs in the snow season. You decide to answer, building your own small signal just beyond the shelter line. You gather dry twigs and splinters of birch bark for a clean flame, then add a bundle of green spruce needles once it's burning. The fresh needles pop and hiss, sending up a thicker, darker smoke that stands out against the pale horizon. You let it rise steady for a few minutes, then pinch the top of the fire to send it in distinct bursts. 1, pause, 2, pause, 1. It's a pattern you've been taught to use for safe to approach. After a while, you see the far-off column shift. It broadens, then thins, then broadens again in response. A slow exchange in the language of heat and ash. You may not know exactly who they are yet, but the conversation has begun. As you let your fire die down, you think about how fragile these threads of connection are. In summer, you could walk there in a day. In winter, the snow and ice stretch the distance, making any contact a deliberate choice. The smoke carries more than warmth, it carries trust, and the risk that comes with it. By the time you return to camp, the distant plume is fading. The wind picks up, smoothing away the signs until only you remember them. But that's enough for now. Somewhere out there, beyond the river and the frozen birch stands, another fire burns, and someone else knows you're here. The sky is a washed-out silver when you wake, the kind that promises more snow before the day is done. A hush hangs over the camp, broken only by the distant crack of ice shifting on the river. This morning, your task is not hunting or hauling, it's heading to a winter gathering along the frozen water, where tribes meet to trade what they have for what they need. These cold season markets weren't luxuries, they were lifelines. When the hunt ran thin or tools wore down faster than expected, swapping goods with neighbors could mean the difference between enduring the rest of winter or watching supplies vanish too soon. Furs, dried meat, carved bone needles, medicinal herbs, even flint, everything had value, and everything had its price. You set out with a sled loaded with your camp's offerings. Thick fox pelts lie stacked neatly, their fur brushed and free of frost. A bundle of dried fish wrapped in birch bark is tied with sinew to keep out the wind. There's also a pair of snowshoe frames made by one of the elders, their rawhide lacing flawless. These will fetch something good, you can already feel it. The path to the meeting place runs along the river, its surface frozen solid enough to walk on. You can feel the ice under your feet vibrate faintly with each step, a reminder that it's alive even when it looks dead. A hawk circles above, its shadow gliding across the snow like a silent scout. Halfway there, you pass a stand of pines where someone has left an offering, small strips of meat, tied to the branches with thin twine. You've heard different explanations for this. Some say it's to honor the animals taken in the hunt, others that it's meant to bring good luck in trade. Whether it's tradition or superstition, the effect is the same. It marks the path as one used by travelers who respect the land. When you reach the bend in the river, the sound of voices carries across the ice. Ahead, a cluster of shelters has sprung up like a temporary village. Smoke curls from a dozen small fires, and the air is thick with the smell of roasting meat and pine resin. People are wrapped in heavy furs, their faces red from the cold, their hands busy arranging goods on the ground. You move between the stalls, stopping to examine a finely carved bone awl. The maker notices your interest and eyes the snowshoe frames on your sled. The trade is quick. A silent nod, an exchange of hands, and now the awl rests in your pack, ready for sewing repairs back at camp. Farther on, you spot a pouch of dried berries, dark and shriveled, but rich with the taste of summer. You offer 2 fox pelts for it, and the trader grins, agreeing without hesitation. These berries will be a rare treat, their tart sweetness a reminder that winter isn't forever. There's a story an old trader once told you, about a winter gathering where 2 bands came close to fighting over a single pot of salt. In the end, they split it evenly, each taking half home. But the strange part was that the next summer they found an entire salt deposit near the river mouth, and both bands laughed about how close they'd come to spilling blood over what had suddenly become abundant. It's the kind of tale that makes you think about how scarcity shapes behavior. By midday, your sled is lighter, but your pack is heavier, full of the things your camp will need in the weeks ahead. Tools, food, a few medicinal roots wrapped in cloth. As you turn to head home, you glance back at the cluster of traders, still haggling under the pale sun. By nightfall, this place will be empty again, the snow covering every sign it was here. The trail home feels shorter, maybe because your mind is already on the moment when you'll bring the goods into the lodge and see the elders' nods of approval. You know that in the harshest season, trade isn't just about survival, it's about connection, and the quiet reassurance that even in a frozen world, you're not alone. The moon is swollen and bright tonight, casting a silver glow over the snow so clear you hardly need a torch to see your way. Out beyond the last lodge, the open ground stretches in a quiet shimmer, broken only by the faint shadow of trees at the far ridge. It's the perfect light for reading the language left behind by other creatures' tracks pressed into the snow like open pages. In winter, trails are written in more than paw prints or hoof marks. The depth, spacing, and even the way snow has drifted into them tell you the story. For hunting tribes, this skill could mean the difference between returning with food or coming back empty-handed. Each print is a clue, where the animal came from, how fast it was moving, and whether it was alone or part of a group. You start by crouching near a set of fresh deer tracks. The hooves have cut sharp edges into the crust, still crisp enough that the wind hasn't softened them. From the stride length, you can tell it was walking, not running. That means it wasn't alarmed good news if you're thinking about finding it later. You follow the trail a short way until it dips toward a stand of spruce, where the snow is shallower and the scent of shelter lingers. There's an old winter saying among the hunters here, the moon lights the trail, but the wind tells you when to stop. Tonight, the air is almost still, carrying sound farther than usual. You can hear a distant rustle of branches, but no snapping twigs or heavy steps, just the small, cautious movement of something settling in for the night. Near the edge of the trees, you spot another set of prints crossing the deer's path. These are rounder, with claw marks fanning forward, likely a fox, judging from the size and spacing. The way the tracks wander, weaving left and right, tells you it was hunting by smell, not in a hurry. You imagine it trotting along, nose low, following the faint scent of mice tunneling beneath the snow. Not all tracking is for hunting. Some nights people follow trails simply to know what's moving through the land. You remember being told about a winter when the elders noticed fewer rabbit tracks near camp. They guessed a predator had moved in, and sure enough, a wolf was spotted days later, circling the outskirts. By reading the ground, they avoided unpleasant surprises. You pause when you find something unusual, a set of small, almost dainty prints pressed in pairs. The stride is long for their size, and the toes are spread wide, each capped by the faint drag of claws. It takes a moment to recall the shape, but then it comes: lynx. In winter, their wide, fur-padded paws act like natural snowshoes, letting them move silently across powder that would bog down heavier animals. Seeing tracks this fresh means the cat isn't far. The temptation to follow is strong, but the wisdom passed down is clear: you don't track a predator at night unless you have a good reason. Instead, you crouch and study the path, tracing it with your eyes as it curves away into the deeper shadows. The lynx will vanish without a sound, leaving only these neat little prints as proof it was here. As you make your way back toward camp, you notice how the moonlight changes the snow's surface. In some places it gleams like glass. In others, it looks almost blue, the shadows deepening in soft ripples. Your own tracks follow you like a ghostly double, each step a reminder that you, too, are leaving a story behind for someone else to read. When you return, the firelight spilling from the lodge makes the snow near the entrance glow in warm shades of gold. You brush off your boots, leaving one last set of prints before stepping inside. Tomorrow, the wind might erase them all, but tonight, the ground holds every movement: yours, the deer's, the fox's, and the silent passage of a lynx through the moonlit world. The air this morning carries a crisp clarity that makes every sound ring sharp: the creak of your boots in the snow, the faint caw of a raven overhead, and the low hum of wind sweeping across the frozen lake. You've been waiting for a day like this, when the ice is thick enough and the weather steady enough to try your hand at ice fishing. Among winter hunters, fishing through the ice was a skill as necessary as tracking or trapping. Game might move on, herds might vanish for weeks, but fish, if you knew where to find them, could keep the camp fed. People learned to read the frozen water the way they read the land, where currents slowed, where shadows shifted, where bubbles frozen in layers of ice marked the deeper pools. You step onto the lake with care, the surface beneath your snowshoes groaning faintly under your weight. The ice here is a deep, clean blue, a sign it's solid and strong. Near the center, you find the spot you've been told about by an elder, close enough to an old river channel to hold fish, but far enough from the current to keep the ice stable. From your sled, you take a chisel-tipped spear and begin chipping at the ice. Each strike sends up sharp fragments that glitter in the low sunlight. The work is slow, deliberate: too much force in one place, and you risk cracks radiating out. When you've cut a hole wide enough, you kneel, letting the cold radiate up through your knees, and scoop out slush until the water gleams dark and clear. Fishing lines here aren't made with fancy reels. You use a short, sturdy stick, the line wound tight around it, baited with bits of dried meat softened in warm water. You lower it into the dark, feeling the weight vanish as the bait sinks. Then comes the hardest part: waiting. There's a story often told during winter nights about a fisherman who once fell asleep beside his hole, only to wake and find a curious otter staring back at him from the water. Whether it really happened or not, it's the kind of tale that gets repeated because it makes the long waits feel less empty. Minutes pass. The wind tugs gently at the hood of your parka. Somewhere beneath you, movement stirs: just a faint tug on the line, so soft you could miss it if you weren't paying attention. You ease the stick back, feeling the resistance grow, then give a quick, firm pull. The water breaks in a small splash as a plump fish emerges, its silver scales flashing in the light before it flops into the snow. You work quickly to unhook it, wrapping it in a scrap of cloth to keep it from freezing solid before you can clean it later. Another line goes in, another stretch of quiet. Out here, silence feels different. It's not emptiness, but a living stillness, filled with the faint groan of ice, the whisper of wind, the distant call of birds that stay through the cold. By the time the sun begins to lean toward the horizon, You've caught enough to make the trip worthwhile. The fish lie in a small pile on the sled, their bodies stiffening in the cold. You cover them with a hide to keep scavengers from sniffing them out on the way home. As you retrace your path toward the shore, you look back over the expanse of the lake. The hole you cut will freeze over by morning, sealing away the dark water until someone else comes to open it again. The trail of your snowshoes will fade under the next snowfall, leaving no sign of the hours spent in the quiet partnership between human patience and the deep, cold life beneath the ice. Back at camp, the fish will be cleaned, some cooked fresh in a stew, others dried or smoked to last the rest of winter. And when you take that first bite, you'll taste not just the meat, but the cold air, the still water, and the long, careful wait that brought it to your hands. The sky today is a deep, unbroken blue, the kind that comes after a night so cold the stars seemed carved into the darkness. It's the sort of weather that sharpens every sound, the pop of frost splitting wood, the crunch of your boots, the faint creak of distant trees. Out here, this is perfect tool-making weather. The cold keeps pests from softening raw materials and makes the air so dry that nothing rots or warps too quickly. For winter survival, every tribe had its own way of creating and maintaining tools when travel was hard and trade was scarce. In lean months, you couldn't count on waiting for someone to bring what you needed. You had to shape it yourself from what the land offered: bone, antler, wood, sinew, and stone. Today you're working on a new spear tip, one meant for ice fishing and small game hunting. The shaft is a straight length of willow you cut in late autumn and dried carefully inside your shelter. You run your hands over it, feeling the smoothness from weeks of sanding it with fine grit. For the tip, you've chosen a section of caribou antler, pale and strong. It takes the edge well without splintering. Using a stone blade, you carve the antler into a long, narrow point. Each stroke sends small shavings spiraling to the ground, their pale curls scattering in the snow like shed bark. The work is slow, not because it's difficult, but because it's precise. Too much pressure, and you could ruin hours of preparation. There's a memory that always comes to you in moments like this of a winter years ago when a sudden thaw cracked an old spearhead in the middle of a hunt. The hunter who carried it had to carve a new one on the spot, using a frozen stump as his workbench. He finished just in time to bring down a hare before nightfall. It's a quiet reminder: out here, you can't take your tools for granted. Once the tip is shaped, you score the base so it will grip the shaft more securely. Then you bind it with a strip of wet sinew, pulling it tight until it squeaks under the tension. As it dries, the sinew will shrink, locking the pieces together. For extra hold, you rub a thin layer of pine resin into the binding, the scent sharp and almost sweet in the cold air. Next, you turn to making a bone awl, small but indispensable for mending hides and lashing together snowshoe frames. The bone comes from the leg of a deer taken weeks ago, boiled and scraped clean. You split it carefully, then grind one end to a fine point against a slab of sandstone. It's delicate work, too much force, and you'll snap it in half. But when you hold the finished awl in your palm, it feels like a promise. Tool-making in winter isn't just about replacing what's broken, it's about adjusting for the season's demands. Ice means spear tips need sharper points to penetrate without deflecting. Frozen ground means digging sticks need stronger tips to pry up buried roots. Even cooking tools change. Ladles are carved with deeper bowls so they can handle thick stews made to last for days. As the sun slides lower, you set your new spear and awl alongside the other gear in your shelter. Each piece has its own story, its own place in the quiet web of survival. You can't eat a spear or sleep under an awl, but without them, there would be no food, no shelter, no way to turn what the land offers into something that will keep you alive. Before night fully arrives, you test the balance of the spear outside. The cold air wraps around you like a second skin, but your hands stay steady. The point catches the last light, a glint against the deepening blue. You imagine it cutting through water, striking true, and you know that when the next need comes, you'll be ready not because you waited for the right tool to arrive, but because you shaped it with your own hands in the heart of winter. The wind today has the high, whistling pitch that only comes when it sweeps across open snow for miles without a break. The clouds above are thin and fast-moving, their shadows skating across the ground. It's a day to keep your eyes on the sky, because up here, the heavens speak long before the weather reaches you. For generations, people living through these winters learned to read the sky as clearly as they read tracks in the snow. Certain tribes could tell by the color of the light on the horizon when a blizzard was brewing. Others watched the moon's halo for signs of shifting winds. And then there are the lights, the dancing ribbons that appear on some nights as if the sky itself has decided to join the fire's glow. You've heard elders say that the aurora is more than a beautiful show. For some, it's a sign of changing weather. For others, a reminder of spirits watching over the living. On a night when the air is cold and still, the lights can move slowly, swaying like banners in a wind you can't feel. On other nights, they leap and twist so quickly you wonder if they're racing to warn you of something unseen. This morning, the sun rose behind a veil of thin clouds, casting a strange copper tint over the snow. It's the kind of light that means trouble could be brewing far away. You decide to check the horizon from the highest ridge near camp. The climb isn't long, but the wind pushes hard at your back, urging you upward. From the top, you can see in every direction rolling snowfields to the north, a frozen river curling away to the west, and to the south, a dark smear of clouds stacked low and heavy. Stories passed down say that certain cloud shapes can tell you the kind of storm that's coming. Thin, high streaks might mean a change in a few days. A thick wall of grey, like the one you see now, means you have hours at most. You watch for other signs: ravens flying low, rabbits staying hidden in their burrows. Even the sound of the wind changes. It's sharper, more restless. On your way back, you stop by the edge of the frozen lake. The ice has a faint glaze on its surface that wasn't there yesterday, a sign the air has warmed just enough to create a thin layer of melt before refreezing. It's subtle, but in winter, subtlety can mean survival. If the air can shift like this in a single day, it can shift into a storm just as fast. At camp, you share what you've seen. The hunters tighten the lashings on their shelters, the children gather more wood for the fires, and the older women bring in drying racks before the wind can knock them over. There's no panic, just quiet, steady movement, the practiced rhythm of people who trust the signs above them. That night, after the work is done, you step outside to check the sky again. The wind has calmed, but the southern clouds are closer now, their edges glowing faintly in the moonlight. Above them, a pale shimmer begins to ripple, faint but unmistakable the northern lights, soft green at first, then deepening to a richer shade. Some say the lights are the spirits of ancestors, gathering to guide the living through dangerous times. Others believe they're warnings, a reminder to respect the land's moods. You stand there a long while, watching them shift and curl like smoke in water, until the cold presses you gently toward the warmth of your lodge. By morning, you know, the first flurries will arrive. The signs have been clear, written across the sky for anyone willing to look up and read. And when they do, you'll be ready not because you can stop the storm, but because you've learned to listen when the sky speaks in its own silent language. The wind has shifted overnight, bringing with it a sharper cold that bites deeper into the lungs. A thin frost coats everything the sleeping hides, the sled runners, even the edges of your mittens. In weather like this, strength alone won't carry you through. You need the quiet allies found in leaves, bark, and needles, the remedies passed down long before anyone thought to write them down. In winter camps, plant medicine wasn't just for the sick, it was for staying well in the first place. People knew which teas kept the lungs clear, which poultices eased frost-nipped skin, which dried roots could bring warmth to a shivering body from the inside out. This morning, you're helping prepare a batch of pine needle tea, a drink that smells of green forests even when the world outside is nothing but white. The needles are taken from the youngest branches, bright green and supple. They're snipped into short lengths with a flake of stone or a small bone knife, then crushed slightly to release their oils. The scent is immediate, sharp, resinous, and almost sweet. You've heard people say this tea carries the memory of summer in it, a reminder to the body that warmth still exists somewhere in the world. In a pot of snowmelt warmed slowly over the fire, the needles swirl and darken the water to a pale gold. A thin steam rises, carrying the scent across the lodge. You know the brew is rich in what the elders call strength from the trees, helpful for keeping sickness at bay when the cold tries to wear you down. One of the older women tells you about a winter long ago when illness swept through the camp after a hunting trip brought in half-frozen game. The people grew weak, but those who drank pine needle tea daily recovered faster. She swears by it to this day. Whether it was the tea itself or the hope it carried, she says, doesn't matter, the body listens to hope too. Once the tea is ready, you ladle it into wooden cups, passing them around to the others gathered by the fire. The first sip is sharp, almost tangy, then softens into a gentle warmth that spreads through your chest. Outside, the wind howls against the shelter, but in here, the tea's steam seems to push back at it. When the cups are empty, the leftover needles are set aside. They'll be dried near the fire and used again in smaller brews. Nothing is wasted. The habit of reusing and stretching resources is so ingrained that even the ashes from the fire are saved, sometimes for cleaning, sometimes for preserving hides. Before night falls, you venture out to gather a few more herbs from the caches kept under snow. The dried bundles are wrapped in bark and tied with sinew, marked with patterns so you know which is which even in low light. You find yarrow for fevers, willow bark for pain, and a small pouch of dried berries that can be chewed to soothe a sore throat. Back in the lodge, the firelight makes the herbs glow faintly against the walls. Their presence is comforting, like a quiet promise that no matter how deep the cold gets, there are still ways to push back. You sip another cup of tea before bed, the taste lingering as the wind hums outside. In the morning the frost will be thicker, the air colder, but you'll meet it with the strength of the trees still warming you from within. The night sky is cloudless, the stars so sharp they seem almost close enough to touch. Yet beneath the beauty, there's a hum in the air, a feeling that something out there is moving. You hear it before you see it, a low, rolling howl that rises and falls like the tide. Wolves. Predators in winter are both a threat and a sign of the land's balance. They follow the herds, test the edges of human camps, and sometimes shadow travelers for miles. Knowing their presence, their patterns, and their behavior was as important as knowing the weather. A single mistake, venturing too far alone, or ignoring a sudden silence could be the last one you made. You step beyond the light of the main fire, your boots crunching softly on the snow. The air is still enough that every sound carries. Somewhere to your right, in the deeper dark beyond the tree line, the snow shifts with a muffled thud, then nothing. It's the nothing that keeps you alert. No rustle, no wind in the branches, no settling snow. When the night goes quiet all at once, it means something is watching. Closer to the camp edge, you crouch and examine the ground. Fresh tracks curve just inside the tree line, their edges sharp, the pads and claws clearly visible. The spacing tells you the animal was moving at a slow trot, unhurried but deliberate. Wolves conserve their energy in winter. They don't chase unless they're certain of success. An older hunter once told you a story of a pack that followed his group for 3 days, always just out of sight. On the 4th day, they vanished. No howls, no tracks, no scent. He believed they'd decided the humans weren't worth the effort. Whether the story is exactly true or a sharpened memory doesn't matter, the point is the same. Predators measure risk, just like you do. As you move along the camp's edge, you hear another sound, a faint, heavy exhale. This one isn't a wolf. The rhythm is slower, quieter. You recognize it, a mountain lion keeping to the shadows. Unlike wolves, these hunters move alone, slipping through the snow without leaving more than a whisper of sound. In the old tales, the mountain lion is a lesson in patience and silence. It doesn't call out, doesn't announce itself. It waits. And if you're not paying attention, you don't know it's there until it's too late. You tighten your grip on your spear, not in fear but in readiness. Out here, alertness is a form of respect. Respect for the animal's skill, and for the balance you both live in. Back at the fire, you add another log and let the flames climb higher. The scent of the smoke drifts outward, a deterrent to some predators, a curiosity to others. You scatter a few sprigs of dried sage into the flames. The smoke thickens, carrying its distinct scent into the night. Some people believe it keeps dangerous spirits away. Others say it confuses a predator's nose. You've never had reason to doubt it. The howls return, this time farther away. The wolves are moving on. The mountain lion stays invisible, but the prickling at the back of your neck eases. You settle onto a log near the fire, letting the warmth soak into your legs. The dark beyond the firelight remains a shifting mystery, but one you understand better with every winter spent here. When you finally head inside your shelter, the fire still burns. You know it will be watched until dawn, just in case. Out here, survival isn't about erasing fear, it's about learning to live alongside it, reading every sound and silence until the land itself tells you when you're safe and when you're not. The snow tonight glows faintly under the moon, the world washed in a soft silver light. Inside the main lodge, the fire's low, not because there's no wood, but because it's a night for gathering in closer, for listening. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and drying herbs, and the only other light comes from the fire's slow pulse. People sit cross-legged on thick furs, their faces lit in amber and shadow, waiting for the storyteller to begin. During the long, cold nights like this were more than entertainment. They were a way of passing down the codes of survival, wrapped inside tales that made the lessons easy to remember. A story could carry the memory of a dangerous ice crossing, or a clever hunting trick for generations without losing its meaning. Tonight's tale begins with a voice low and steady, drawing everyone into a different time. The elder speaks of a winter when the snow was so deep the lodges were nearly buried. Food was scarce, and the wind howled for weeks without stopping. A young hunter ventured out alone, armed with nothing but his bow and the blessing of the spirits. He followed a trail of snowshoe hare, only to find it crossed by the much larger tracks of a bear. In that moment, the hunter faced a choice: follow the easier prey or track the bear for its precious fat and meat. The lesson, the elder says, is that survival isn't just about the easier path, it's about the right one. The hunter chose the bear, shadowing it for 2 days until the animal stopped to rest in a hollow. He made his move swiftly, honoring the animal's life and ensuring his people would have enough to last until the thaw. As the story unfolds, small sounds fill the space, children shifting in their blankets, the quiet pop of a log in the fire. A few people close their eyes, not in boredom but in focus, letting the images form in their minds. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the lodge walls as if reminding everyone that the dangers in the stories still walk the land. A younger voice chimes in with a lighter tale about the time a trickster spirit scattered animal tracks in all directions, leading hunters in dizzying circles until they returned to camp with nothing but sore feet. Whether or not the spirit exists isn't the point. The laughter that follows loosens shoulders and warms the room as much as the fire. One of the old women takes a turn, telling of a time she was a girl and nearly froze after losing her way in a sudden whiteout. She survived by remembering her grandmother's advice. When the world disappears, listen for the water. She followed the muffled sound of a half-frozen creek until it led her to a familiar bend in the land, and then home. The younger listeners nod, they'll remember that. In the pause that follows, you realize the power in these moments. They bind people together across years and winters, turning survival into shared memory. Even if the fire went out tomorrow, the stories would carry the warmth until it was lit again. When the gathering breaks for the night, the fire is stirred one last time, its glow following you out into the silver-lit snow. The wind has calmed, and the only sound is the soft crunch of your steps. The lessons from the stories are still turning in your mind, not heavy like rules, but light enough to carry with you wherever the cold might lead. The morning breaks grey and dim, the horizon blurred where snow meets sky. You step outside and immediately know this will be no ordinary day. The air is heavy with moisture, and the wind has an odd, swirling quality that makes it difficult to tell which direction it's coming from. In winter, that usually means only one thing: a whiteout is near. A whiteout can turn the most familiar path into an endless, featureless void. Landmarks vanish, the ground and sky merge into the same blank sheet, and even sound feels swallowed. For people living in these lands, learning to navigate without sight of the horizon was essential. You could not rely on what you saw, you had to trust what you felt, heard, and smelled. The elders taught that your ears become your compass in such weather. The muffled rush of a half-frozen stream can guide you. The crack of ice beneath your feet can tell you whether you've strayed too close to a river. Even the way the wind carries the smell of smoke or pine can lead you home. You make a mental list before leaving camp, tasks that must be done despite the storm brewing. Snares must be checked, and a cache of dried meat stored outside camp needs to be retrieved before scavengers find it. You pack lightly, a coil of rope, a skin of water, and a bone whistle tied around your neck. If the snow erases your voice, the whistle will carry farther. By the time you're halfway to the snares, the storm is upon you. Snow begins to spin wildly in the air, and the ground's surface starts to shift under your boots, not because it's moving, but because your eyes can't tell where it ends. You tighten your hood and lower your gaze, letting your senses stretch outward in other ways. Your boots crunch over packed drifts, the sound sharp and hollow in places where ice lies beneath. You smell a faint trace of wood smoke, too faint to be from your own camp. Someone else is nearby or was recently. The wind changes, carrying the scent away, but you mark the direction in your mind. There's a memory you carry of another whiteout, years ago, when a young hunter ignored the warnings and set out alone without rope or whistle. He was found hours later, disoriented and half frozen less than 200 paces from camp, convinced he'd been walking for days. That story is why you keep the rope tied to your belt, trailing behind you to mark your path. Reaching the snares takes twice as long as usual. The lines of twisted sinew emerge from the snow like thin, dark scars. 2 holed rabbits, their fur stiff with frost. You quickly free them, tucking them into your pack before turning toward the meat cache. This time, you let your body remember the way, counting paces, feeling the slope of the land underfoot, noting how the wind brushes one side of your face more than the other. When you reach the cache, you find it undisturbed, the hides covering it rimed with ice but intact. You bundle the meat tightly and secure it to your sled. The snow now falls so thickly that even your footprints vanish within moments. Without the rope and your mental map, the way back would be guesswork. The return is slow, but the outline of the camp finally emerges through the blur, a dark smudge against the white. Relief settles into your chest as you cross the boundary into the windbreak. Inside, the air feels still, though the storm continues just beyond. You store the meat and hang the rabbits near the fire to thaw. Outside, the snow keeps falling, erasing the path you took, wiping the land clean as if no one had walked it today. But you know better. The storm hides, it doesn't erase. The trails you've walked still exist, just waiting for the weather to calm enough for someone else to find them. The storm has passed, leaving behind a landscape so quiet it feels like the world is holding its breath. Snowdrifts stand in soft, sculpted shapes, their edges crisp against the pale morning light. Today, the camp will send a few people to meet a neighboring group, staying several valleys away. You've been chosen to go, partly because you've made the trip before, and partly because you can speak enough of their language to make yourself understood. Winter travel between communities was about more than trade. It was an exchange of knowledge, news, and sometimes warnings. People learned bits of each other's speech, not as a curiosity, but as a tool for survival. A single misunderstood word could mean the difference between welcome and suspicion, especially in a season where resources were tight. Your small party sets out early, the snowshoes biting lightly into the drifts. The cold air is still enough that you can hear each other's breathing, and now and then, a few words are exchanged, not just in your own tongue, but in fragments of the other camp's language, practicing before you arrive. A greeting, a phrase for safe travel, a polite request for shelter. You remember a winter gathering from years past where a single misheard word turned a friendly trade into a tense standoff. One side thought the other had refused a gift, when in fact they'd only meant to say they had no more to offer. The tension lasted until an elder stepped in to explain, switching languages mid-sentence as smoothly as shifting from walking to running. That day reminded everyone why it was worth learning at least a few words from your neighbors. By midday, the sun glints off the snow so fiercely you have to squint against it. You stop in the shelter of a low ridge to rest and share dried meat, passing a water skin from hand to hand. The conversation is light, sprinkled with short phrases from the other tongue, half practice, half amusement. A few times, someone laughs at a mispronunciation, then patiently repeats the correct sound. Out here, laughter can be as important as warmth for keeping spirits up. When the neighboring camp finally comes into view, smoke from their fires rising in straight columns, you feel a small shift in your chest, a quiet relief at the sight of life in the distance. Approaching slowly, you call out in their language, the words careful but confident. The first faces you see break into smiles, and you're waved toward the main fire. The air smells of roasting meat and spruce. Hands reach out in greeting, some gripping your arms, others giving the brief nod that means acknowledgement without breaking the flow of work. You settle in among them, switching between your language and theirs as you talk about the storm, the state of the herds, and the health of your people. Before you leave, a woman from their camp hands you a bundle wrapped in hide-dried berries, more than your party could gather in weeks this deep into winter. You thank her in her own language, feeling the weight of the gesture more than the bundle itself. On the way back, the trail feels easier, though the snow is no less deep. The words you've practiced today linger in your mind, weaving themselves into memory alongside the faces of those who spoke them. In the heart of winter, language is more than communication. It's a bridge over the frozen distances, a thread that keeps communities from becoming islands in the snow. The cold today is the kind that seems to sharpen sound instead of muffling it. Every footstep snaps against the snow. Every breath escapes in a visible rhythm. In the center of camp, a small group has gathered, not for hunting, not for trade, but for music. Out here, music isn't an indulgence. It's another way to keep the cold from crawling too far inside. During the winter months, instruments are kept close to the fire when not in use, their wood and hide skins protected from cracking in the dry air. Drums, flutes, and rattles are the most common, each carrying a voice that can cut through even the heaviest snowstorm. A drum beat can summon a gathering. A flute can carry a message from one end of camp to another, and a rattle, small as it might be, can keep time for songs that outlast the night. Today, a pair of elders sit near the largest fire, warming their hands over the flames before taking up their instruments. One begins with a low, steady rhythm on a drum made from stretched moose hide. The other raises a cedar flute to her lips, letting the first clear notes drift into the crisp air. The sound bends and sways like smoke, finding its way into every corner of camp. There's a story often told about a particularly harsh winter when the food was low and spirits were lower. One night, a young woman played her flute by the fire, the melody curling through the darkness until even the wolves on the ridge fell silent. Some say the storm eased the next day, as if the land itself had paused to listen. Whether the weather truly shifted or not, the people swore they felt lighter, their hearts warmer, after that night. You pick up a rattle made from a gourd filled with small pebbles. The sound is soft but steady, like the patter of snow against a hide roof. As the rhythm grows, more people join in, hands clapping, voices humming, feet stamping lightly against the packed snow. The music wraps around everyone like a second layer of clothing, invisible but warm. Children circle the fire, their movements half dance, half game. They leap over patches of shadow, spin until they lose their balance, and laugh when they tumble into the snow. Even the hunters, usually reserved, let themselves sway to the rhythm, their eyes closed for a few moments as if somewhere else entirely. When the last notes fade, there's a stillness that isn't empty. It's full of the echo of what just happened, like the way heat lingers in the stones long after the fire dies. People drift back to their tasks, their steps lighter than before. You tuck the rattle back near the fire, feeling its faint warmth in your palm. As evening settles in, you realize that music, in this frozen season, is more than sound. It's proof that life continues to move, that there's still beauty to be made, even when the world outside seems determined to still every living thing. Out here, that might be the most important kind of survival there is. The air this morning is so cold it feels brittle, as if a sudden movement might crack it. The fire has burned low overnight, and its embers glow faintly under a thin layer of ash. You pull your cloak tighter and feel the weight in your stomach, a hunger that's not just about missing a meal, but about the long, slow march toward the end of winter. Supplies have to be stretched now more than ever. Managing food in this season is an art as much as it is a necessity. Every dried strip of meat, every smoked fish, every handful of berries has to be balanced between what you need today and what you'll need weeks from now. Some tribes had strict rules about winter stores. No one took more than a set share at one time, and special caches were hidden away for true emergencies. Today's task is to prepare a stew that will feed many but use as little of the precious supply as possible. You start with a pot of water set to warm over the fire, melting snow to fill it. Into that goes a small portion of dried venison, just enough to flavor the broth. Next come a few root vegetables from the buried cache, their skins wrinkled but still good. Thin slices of these will stretch their presence in the pot. A handful of dried wild onions goes in next, their scent blooming quickly in the rising steam. The smell alone lifts spirits, proof that the meal will have flavor, not just substance. You remember being told that food in winter should never just fill the belly. It should remind people what good days taste like. One of the elders adds a pinch of crushed herbs, explaining that even the smallest addition can make the mind believe it's eating more than it is. You've seen the truth of that, how a richly scented pot draws people in, how it slows the eating so no one feels rushed or deprived. There's a story told about a winter when the stores were so low that the cook of the camp made a stone stew. He placed a clean, round stone in a pot of boiling water and told everyone it would be ready once the stone shared its flavor. One by one, people offered small bits of food to help the stone along some meat, a few roots, to a pinch of spice. By the end, the pot was full enough to feed everyone. Whether or not the stone helped, the trick kept the camp fed and laughing for one more night. The stew today simmers for hours, the thin slices of meat softening, the vegetables lending their sweetness to the broth. When it's finally served, the portions are modest but satisfying. Each person gets enough to warm their stomach, with a little left in the pot for tomorrow's start. The leftovers will taste even richer after a night by the fire. As the bowls are emptied, the mood in the lodge lightens. People talk more, smile more. Hunger is still there, but for now, it's been kept at bay not just by the food, but by the act of sharing it. Out here, every meal is a reminder that you're not facing the cold alone, and that's a kind of nourishment no root cellar can hold. The snow has settled into a thick, unbroken blanket across the valley, softening every sound except the crunch of your own steps. It's time to move. Winter here isn't a season to endure in one place forever. Some valleys are safer than others when the deep cold digs in, and your people have decided to travel to one of those sheltered pockets before the blizzards lock the land completely. Seasonal movement was a tradition for many tribes, guided by knowledge passed through generations. Certain places offered protection from the wind, reliable water sources that stayed open even in deep frost, or better access to game. Knowing where to go wasn't luck, it was the memory of countless winters stitched together. Your sled is already loaded, dried meat wrapped in hide bundles, tools tied down with rawhide strips, extra fur blankets rolled tight. You check the lashings twice before slipping into the harness. Around you, the rest of the camp is breaking down shelters, shaking snow from hides, and bundling goods. The air is filled with the sound of scraping, dragging, and the occasional bark of laughter when someone's bundle tips into the snow. The route takes you along a frozen river, the ice gleaming under the pale sun. Snowshoes make the travel easier, spreading your weight so you skim over the softer drifts. The river's surface is marked with faint cracks, the sound of them shifting echoing like low thunder beneath your feet. It's steady now, but you know to keep to the center, away from thin ice near the bends. Midway through the day, you stop to rest in a grove of spruce. The trees block the wind, and the smell of resin is a welcome change from the sharp scent of ice. Someone starts a small fire, and strips of dried fish are warmed over the flames just enough to take the edge off hunger, without dipping too far into the stores. There's an old tale about a migration gone wrong, when a group left too late in the season and was caught in a blizzard halfway to their destination. They dug into the snow for shelter, surviving for 3 days on what little they carried. When the storm cleared, they found themselves only a short walk from the valley they'd been trying to reach. The story's lesson is clear. Leave early, travel steadily, and never assume you know exactly how far you have left. By late afternoon, you reach the entrance to the sheltered valley. The wind drops immediately, as if you've stepped into another season. Here, the trees are thicker, the ground uneven enough to break the sweep of the weather. You can hear the faint trickle of water under the ice near the creek, proof that you'll have a source for melting and drinking. Camp is set quickly. Hides are stretched over frames, fires are lit, and sleds are unpacked. The sound of voices grows warmer now, carrying relief as much as conversation. You roll out your blanket near the fire and feel a deep, steady satisfaction. You've arrived in a place where the cold will bite less sharply, where the storms will lose some of their teeth. In the morning, you'll scout the area for fresh game trails and safe routes through the trees. But tonight, you rest with the knowledge that you've moved with the land instead of against it, following the old paths that have carried your people through winters longer and harsher than this one. The air in the sheltered valley is still, but the cold seeps in quietly, like water finding cracks in stone. You wake with a stiffness in your fingers that warns you the frost is deeper today. When you check your hands, the skin on 2 fingertips is pale and waxy, a first sign you've been taught to respect. Frostbite begins quietly, and if you ignore it, it will take more than it gives back. In the north, knowing how to spot and treat frostbite was as essential as knowing how to light a fire. You'd learn to look for 3 stages: the pale numbness that comes first, the burning sting that follows, and if left too long, the hardening of skin and muscle. The first stage can be reversed. The last might mean losing more than just comfort. You retreat to the fire, cradling your hands in your lap before slowly bringing them close to the warmth. The trick is patience. Heat too fast and you can damage the skin further. Instead, you press your hands against the warm fur lining of your cloak, letting your own body heat start the work. An elder sees you and nods approval. They've known people who ignored those first pale spots and paid with fingers they couldn't spare. There's a story often told about a hunter who returned from a trip across the frozen river with his cheeks white as bone. He laughed off the warnings and went to sleep without tending to them. By morning, the skin had darkened and the damage was done. The lesson spread fast. Frostbite is a thief that works while you sleep. You check your boots as well. Frostbite isn't picky about where it strikes. Toes are especially vulnerable. The lining inside is still dry, a good sign. But you take the time to rub your feet and flex them, keeping blood moving. Out here, even the smallest routines are acts of survival. Later in the day, you help repair another traveler's mittens. The stitching has loosened at the fingertips, letting in cold air. You patch it with sinew and add a second layer of rabbit fur, knowing that in this weather, prevention is far easier than treatment. Before night falls, you prepare for another check. In the dim light, you watch your companions for the small signs: someone holding their hands close to their body, a face losing color in patches, a stiff gait that might mean numb feet. Out here, you don't wait for people to ask for help. You offer it before they realize they need it. By the time you settle near the fire again, your hands are warm, your toes are safe, and you've added one more quiet victory to the day. Frostbite is a patient enemy, but so are you, and you've learned that patience can be just as deadly to the cold as the cold can be to you. The valley is still tonight, the kind of stillness that feels like the world is holding its breath. You lie under your blanket, half awake, when a dream begins to pull you somewhere else. somewhere not bound by the cold or the weight of snow. In many winter traditions, dreams were not dismissed as idle stories of the mind. They were maps, messages, and sometimes warnings. People spoke of spirit guides appearing in sleep to offer direction, comfort, or caution. These guides might take the shape of animals, ancestors, or even shifting forms that defied clear description. Your dream begins with a path cutting through snow so deep it rises above your waist. The air is dim, but not dark, lit by a pale glow that seems to come from the ground rather than the sky. You hear a crunching sound ahead, and from between the trees steps a figure cloaked in white fur. The face is that of an elder you've never met, yet you know them by the set of their eyes, by the warmth in their gaze. They don't speak at first. Instead, they walk ahead, glancing over their shoulder to be sure you follow. You notice that your feet no longer sink into the snow. Each step lands lightly, leaving no print behind. The elder leads you to a small clearing where a fire burns without smoke, its flames pale blue and steady. They gesture toward it, and when you look into the flames, you see images, your camp in the valley, the frozen river, a storm cresting over the ridge. Then you see something else, a path through the forest you've never taken, but somehow recognize. When you wake, the air in the lodge is warm from the night's fire, but the dream's chill clings to you. You sit up slowly, turning the images over in your mind. Out here, you've learned not to ignore such visions. Whether they come from your own thoughts or from something greater, they often carry pieces of truth. Later, you tell the dream to one of the elders. They nod thoughtfully, explaining that the smokeless fire is a sign of guidance, and the untrodden path may be a route you'll need when conditions change. They remind you that spirit guides don't always hand over answers, they offer clues, and the work of understanding them is yours. That night, as you settle into your blankets again, you look toward the tree line outside camp. You half expect to see the cloaked elder watching from the shadows, but there's only the steady darkness of the forest. Still, you feel less alone. Somewhere, in the quiet spaces between waking and sleep, you know the path is there, waiting for the moment you'll need it. The air is sharp and bright this morning, each breath turning to steam that drifts away in long ribbons. The valley feels calm, but there's a hum of anticipation. Today marks the midwinter feast. In seasons like this, celebrating isn't about abundance, it's about honoring the fact that you've made it this far, and that there's still enough strength, food, and warmth to keep going. Preparations start early. Fires are stoked higher than usual, and the smell of roasting meat drifts through camp, weaving between the lodges. From storage caches come carefully guarded treats: smoked fish from the autumn run, a handful of dried berries, even a few roots saved for just this occasion. The feast is less about quantity and more about the care taken in making it. You're tasked with preparing a broth that will be served to everyone before the main meal. The pot is large enough to hold snowmelt, chunks of venison, and a scattering of wild herbs. As it simmers, the steam rises in fragrant waves, carrying the promise of comfort to those working nearby. Around you, people are busy with other dishes: flatbread cooked on hot stones, rabbit roasted on skewers, fish laid in coals wrapped in green leaves. Laughter moves through the camp like its own kind of warmth. Children carry small bundles of firewood from one lodge to another, proud to be part of the work. There's an old tale often retold during midwinter, a winter so long and harsh that a village decided to hold no feast at all. But one family prepared a tiny meal anyway, just enough for themselves. As they sat down to eat, neighbors appeared at their door with small offerings: a strip of meat, a pouch of nuts, a piece of dried fruit. By the end of the night, the village had more food together than they'd thought possible. The lesson was clear: even in scarcity, sharing multiplies what you have. When the sun begins to fade, everyone gathers around the largest fire in the center of camp. The food is laid out, and the air fills with the mingled scents of smoke, meat, and herbs. Elders speak first, offering thanks not just for the food, but for the safe passage through the first half of winter. Then the eating begins. You take your time with each bite, knowing that this isn't just about feeding the body, it's about feeding the spirit. Each flavor is a reminder of the hunts, the gathering trips, the trades that made it possible. Every person here has contributed in some way, whether through skill, labor, or the quiet persistence of simply enduring. When the fire burns lower, songs rise into the night air. The voices are strong despite the cold, and the sound echoes off the snow-covered trees. You watch the sparks drift upward and imagine they're carrying the warmth of this night into the rest of the season. By the time the last embers glow, you feel a steady satisfaction, not the fleeting fullness of a big meal, but the deep, grounded comfort of knowing the community stands together, ready to meet whatever the second half of winter will bring. The first sound you hear in the morning isn't the crackle of the fire, it's the faint trickle of water somewhere beyond the trees. After so many weeks of deep cold, that sound is strange enough to make you stop what you're doing and listen harder. The ice is loosening its grip in places, and though winter isn't done, the earliest signs of thaw are here. For people who live through these long, frozen months, the first running water carries a weight that's hard to explain. It's not just a change in the land, it's a promise that the balance is shifting. But the thaw has its dangers too. Ice can grow treacherous, snow can hide pockets of meltwater deep enough to swallow a leg, and predators move differently when their hunting grounds start to open up. You decide to follow the sound, picking your way carefully through the valley. The snow is still thick, but softer underfoot, the surface giving way with each step. Along the creek bed, you find a gap in the ice where water slips through, dark and quick. Steam curls upward, faint but steady. There's a memory the elders sometimes share of a year when the thaw came early. Hunters eager to cross a river fell through weak ice, losing supplies and barely escaping with their lives. Since then, the rule has been simple. Early water is for watching, not crossing. Still, it's hard not to linger by the creek. The sound is lively after months of muffled stillness, and you realize you've been missing it without knowing. A small flock of birds flits overhead, their calls sharp in the cold air. They'll be feeding on insects that emerge where the water runs, another sign the season's edges are shifting. Back at camp, you tell others what you've seen. A few go to look for themselves, returning with nods and quiet smiles. The knowledge travels fast, everyone feels the lift in mood, even if they won't say it out loud. That night, as the fire burns and the wind slides gently over the lodge walls, you think about how subtle changes carry the loudest meaning here. A patch of open water, a bird's call, the way the air smells faintly less sharp. The cold will return in the morning, but now you know it's not forever. The thaw has spoken, even if only in a whisper. The change is slow, almost reluctant, but it's there. Each day, the sun lingers a little longer on the horizon, and the shadows stretch less quickly across the snow. The light has softened, trading its winter glare for a warmer glow that hints at the season to come. You notice it in the way the snow's surface loses some of its icy crust, in the way your breath doesn't hang in the air quite as long before vanishing. For generations, people here have marked the return of light as a turning point, not just in weather but in the spirit. This is when you can start planning beyond survival, repairing tools for the hunts to come, scouting for places to fish when the ice finally gives way, even thinking about the first foraging trips for new greens. It's a shift from holding on to looking forward. You take a walk through the valley, following a trail that winds between spruce and birch. The snow still crunches under your boots, but now and then you hear the faint drip of meltwater from high branches. The air smells different, less sharp, more open. In places where the wind has brushed the snow away, you see patches of dark earth peeking through, stubborn against the cold. There's a story passed down about a year when the return of light came late, and the people began to doubt it would come at all. But when it finally arrived, the change was so swift that within a week, streams were running, birds were nesting, and the first shoots of grass had pushed through the thawed soil. The story is told not as a warning but as a reminder. The seasons turn in their own time, no matter how impatient you are. Back in camp, you help hang extra hides outside to air in the sun. Their scent of smoke and storage begins to fade, replaced by the clean smell of open air. Others take advantage of the slightly softer weather to patch shelters, gather more wood before the trails turn muddy, and mend clothing worn thin over the long months. That evening, as the sun dips behind the ridge, the light lingers on the snow just a moment longer than it did yesterday. You watch it fade, knowing tomorrow it will return a little stronger. The winter isn't finished, not yet, but it's no longer the only force at work. The light has begun its slow reclaiming, and with it comes the quiet certainty that the land will soften again. The morning arrives quietly, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and the faint sweetness of melting snow. A pale mist hangs low over the valley, curling between the trees and hugging the ground like a second skin. You wake to the sound of dripping, a slow, steady rhythm from the lodge roof as yesterday's frost loosens its hold. It's not the triumphant rush of spring, not yet, but it's the beginning of something softer. This is the season's turning point, the moment when survival shifts into reflection. The hardest nights are behind you, and the land, though still wrapped in winter's colors, is beginning to stretch in small, almost shy ways. People move differently now, not with the urgency of fighting the cold, but with the steady, deliberate care of those who know the worst has passed. You step outside and breathe in air that feels almost forgiving. The snow underfoot is damp, each step sinking a little deeper than it would have a month ago. Patches of earth have begun to show near the bases of trees, dark and rich, holding the promise of what will grow there when the warmth returns for good. In the center of camp, there's less smoke than before. Fires burn smaller, just enough to cook and keep the chill at bay. Wood is still precious, but the need for constant roaring flames has eased. You help carry the last of the season's firewood into a covered storage, saving it for the final cold snaps that everyone knows will come before the true thaw. Someone is boiling the last of the stored berries into a syrup, the rich scent filling the air. It's a small luxury, too small to waste in the deep cold, but perfect now, when it can be shared without fear of running short. You're handed a cup of warm water, sweetened with a spoonful, and the taste spreads slowly over your tongue, carrying memories of summer's green fullness. There's talk among the elders about lessons from this winter. They recall the deep freeze that came earlier than expected, the near loss of one hunter to frostbite, the day the ice on the river cracked without warning. They also speak of successes: the quick shelter built during the worst storm, the trade journey that brought medicine just in time, the night a story kept the entire camp awake until dawn, and perhaps warmer for it. You listen quietly, knowing that these recollections aren't just for looking back. They're seeds for the next winter, each one holding a piece of knowledge that might save someone when the cold returns. As the sun climbs higher, a group sets out to check the creek. You join them, moving along the trail where snow and slush mix underfoot. The sound of running water is louder today, the creek's surface breaking open in places to reveal a steady, clear current. The hunters note the fish darting beneath the ice, already beginning to stir with the change in the water. It's too early to fish here, but the sight is another quiet reassurance. Back in camp, repairs are underway. Snowshoes are retied, spear tips checked, furs brushed and laid out to dry fully before storage. The work is done without rush, as if the camp itself is taking a long breath after months of holding it. By evening, the sky glows in a way that makes the snow seem to light up from within, each crystal catching the last rays. You sit by the fire, feeling the warmth seep into your bones, and realize the cold outside doesn't feel like an enemy anymore. It's still there, still sharp, but its edge has dulled. Later, lying under your blanket, you think about the path through winter, how it wasn't a single act of survival, but thousands of small ones, layered together like the hides in your cloak. Each decision, each shared meal, each watch in the night was a stitch in the fabric that carried you here. And now, as the land begins to loosen its grip, you carry not just the memory of endurance, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can meet the cold again when it returns. The night settles soft around the camp, the fires burn low, and somewhere in the trees, water runs unseen but constant. Winter will be back, but for now, you've made it through. Now, the pace eases. The fires are nothing more than gentle glows, breathing warmth into the cool night air. The work of the day is finished, and the sound of quiet voices fades until only the crackle of embers remains. You can feel the season itself leaning back, letting the tension of survival loosen its hold. Outside, the snow reflects a faint light from the moon, softening the edges of the world. Every shadow is blurred, every sound muted, as if the land is resting alongside you. Somewhere, water slips under the ice, the sound low and steady, a reminder that life has been flowing beneath the surface all along. You shift beneath your blanket, the familiar scent of smoke and hide wrapping around you like a second skin. Your muscles are tired but loose, the kind of tired that carries no urgency, just the comfort of having done enough for today. The cold is still here, brushing against the lodge walls, but it doesn't press in as it once did. It feels more like an old companion now, one you've learned to sit with in silence. The long nights, the storms, the careful counting of food, those belong to another part of the season, and they've passed. Your breathing slows. The fire's light flickers behind your closed eyes, then fades into darkness. You can still hear the faint trickle of thawing water, the sigh of wind through distant trees, the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat. Everything is slower, gentler. The valley holds you in its quiet. And with that stillness around you, you drift, knowing that the coldest nights have given way to something softer, and that sleep will carry you into the light of a gentler season.